So your knitting pins, I'm using metal here. They're 5mm, and the wool we're going to use is 100% wool. So from a sheep, 100% wool, and this is actually from Ireland. And then if you look at the rest of your information on the label, this label actually tells you the best crochet hook to use for this size of iron wool. A 4.5mm US 7, and the knitting needles it recommends are 4.5mm US 7. I'm using 5mm, which are US 8, and then the expectation is that you will get 10 centimeters square. This is from Europe, it's Ireland, so we're working off metric, with 22 rows and 16 stitches across. Okay, let's get started. So first of all, we need to find our starting point. So the wool is twisted up here in, this is what's called a skein of wool. And then if you gently sort of move it all apart, you'll be able to find your start and your finish. So you can either undo the knot, or you can give it a quick snip. So I'm just going to see if I can undo it here, and then we'll get started. There we go. So as you can see, this is our start and our end. Typically what you would do, so this wouldn't all get knotted up, is you would then begin to wrap it into a ball, and it just makes it easier to manage. So I'm not going to do that just now, but I'm gonna gently move it over here, and then we'll get started. I will pull out some thread, some yarn, so we have plenty to get started with. So the first thing we need to do is make a loop, our first loop, and in fact it'll be a kind of a knot. So I wrap the thread around my fingers like so, and what you want to do is bring up a loop like this. Okay, so it'll open up again quite easily. So it's not a full knot per se, but you just wrap it through there and you pull it through. So this becomes your first loop. So then you tighten it. You never want your stitches to be super tight, just because it gets harder to work with. So you hold your knitting needles in both hands. We have a stationary hand, almost stationary, and we very much a working hand on the right. So what we're going to do now is cast on. So you insert your needle from your right hand. What I like to do to make sure that I don't by mistake start knitting with my tail is I put my tail into my left hand like that, just lightly. So you're coming into the very first loop or stitch. This is now called a stitch in front. This is the back here. So you're coming in front and underneath. So in front and underneath. And you can see how the knitting pin sits snugly in my right hand. And then what you begin to do is just wrap your yarn around the needle underneath, and then all you want to do is pull through this loop. So the yarn that you've wrapped around, you're pulling it through your first loop, and then you're going to put it on your needle. You're going to tug it gently and there you have your second stitch. So we're going to do a few more of these. I'm going in again underneath the front stitch, wrap it round from underneath, pull it through. You can see here where I'm using the finger on my left hand just to make sure my loop doesn't fall off. You pull it through, make that quite loose, and then bring it up over the needle. So I recommend that you take your time at this point, because if you make the stitches correctly when you cast on, the rest of it becomes very straightforward. You know, the first couple of rows are always a little, you know, funky until the knitting settles down. But when you realize after like row 3, you know, it all smooths out. So we just keep casting on here. So we're just repeating the same thing. Needle into the front of the stitch, underneath, wrap the yarn around, pull it through, and you've just created your next stitch or your second loop. So I'm going to cast on 20 stitches, and then we'll start knitting from there. Start knitting rows. So I have 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, so 11 more. So don't be afraid to stop at any time just to check your stitches. 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. So 2 more. And then the thing to remember is moving forward that you must always have 20 stitches on your row. So there you go. We've cast on our first row, 20 stitches.